It looks like we are live once again. This is, I guess, maybe a corollary to the Manny Wolf Show. This is called The Future of Education. It is a weekly roundtable discussion where I want to get opinions across a cross-section of people about the current state of education, where education is going, and what we can do. Hopefully, there's a bias here that I will openly admit. What I'm curious to find out is, how do we make education match the realities of the world we are moving into? Today, I've got Debbie Elder, I've got Tom Brennan, I've got Joel Hawbaker, and I've got Jackie Gold. Debbie and Jackie are what are you? You're like my right and left hand team members. I don't even for once in a blue moon, I was at a loss for a metaphor or an analogy there.
My work is done.
Your work is done. My point being that for those of you watching, you will see Debbie and Jackie on all of these, or at least most of them. And then we will rotate the other guests. So today I want to talk about the sort of the risks and challenges inherent in school being outpaced, education being outpaced by Moore's Law. So for those of you that don't know, Moore's Law is the law that states that technology will double in speed every 2 years. What this has done so far is it means that companies like Tesla, companies like SpaceX, like Google, like Netflix, like Amazon, all big tech companies virtually cannot hire people anymore out of high school or college that can do a majority of the jobs they need done. They have to hire them and then train them internally. Laszlo Bock is one of my favorite to me, he's a rock star of where education and human resources and the work world is going. He used to be the head of people ops at Google until he left. And he famously was the one that came out and said Google has to stop hiring based on degrees, because we're hiring all these people from Stanford and from, here and there. And just because they have the degree doesn't mean they can do the work. So this is a very, very real challenge. Joel, I'd love to get your take first on specifically how far apart do you see public education and the realities of the work world of tomorrow being?
That's a great question. And so a lot of my background is in history. That's my degree. That's a lot of what I've taught. And so that's the lens that I'm coming from. A large part, especially in America, a large part of the public education system is still based on the old Industrial Revolution model. Right? Mm-hmm. It's based on producing good factory workers. Absolutely. And unfortunately, that's not what we need anymore. Right? I say that because that, like you mentioned, education is not providing students with what they need. And to me, there are two big gaps. One of them is we are measuring things that are not actually that useful to measure, which is why you get kids who have degrees who still don't have a whole lot of skills. Mm-hmm. And the other one is we're not measuring things that we need to be paying more attention to because they're hard to measure. It's hard to measure empathy, right? It's hard to measure what we call life skills in a traditional grade kind of a situation. So for me, this is something I've been trying to get students to understand for the 14 years I've been in a high school classroom. To me, education has never been about the knowledge stuck in your brain. It's much more about the skills that you develop. And so one of the big things I've focused on for years and years is I want kids to understand how to read and write better so they can think better, because those things are all related. And to me, education, because I fall in line with C.S. Lewis about this, education is not about what you know. It's about understanding values and morals. That is, if your education is not aimed at creating better human beings who are good at thinking and reasoning and empathizing, your education is not actually worth that much. I don't care where your degree is from. I don't care what the letters are you have after your name. If you can't identify with people on a human level, if you can't use your brain to think and to reason and to problem solve, I'm just honestly, I'm not that impressed with your education.
So first, I want to say, Debbie, Jackie, this is not a setup.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't.
I saw
didn't-
Jackie nodding, and I thought, yes, this is what I'm talking about.
I didn't vet Joel and know he was going to just come in with that perfect answer. Debbie,
honestly, I think I fall in the minority of a lot of teachers that I've talked with over the years, because a lot of them are still focused on other things.
I think that's the concern a lot of us on this call have, Joel. I know it's a big concern I have. I know it's not just a concern that Debbie and Jackie have. It's something they've done something about. You know, and so Debbie, what do you think there with measuring the soft skills? Because I know that's a big part of what you do. So who are you and where do you get off?
So, hi, I am Debbie Elder. I'm the owner of Shady Oak Primary School just outside of Richmond, Texas, close to Houston. And we concentrate, as Joel said, just as heavily on the soft skills as we do on the reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I'd like to echo Joel in we provide a strong foundational base so that they can critically think, collaborate, connect, communicate, be creative, and problem solve. And those are the 6 pillars that we operate under. And everything goes through that filter. So if it doesn't go through that filter, and if we can't say to a student, this is why you need to learn this, then we're not teaching it. We also are very cognizant of the fact that this is 2020. You can Google anything. Yeah. And so we don't want to fill our students' heads with a bunch of nonsense like what's the capital of Ohio. They can Google that. They don't need to be memorizing that. We want to leave the brain space for things that are really important, which allows them to make a better world for others. We practice a lot of social and emotional skill sets, and we assess them by how others register. We do a lot of restorative justice circles. We have a lot of opportunities to speak and work things out. We teach conflict resolution. We teach how to collaborate. And I think all of those skills really prepare them to get into a world where the people that I talk to right now that are looking to hire, as Manny referenced, they need those skill sets. The computer can do everything, right? So what do you add to the table? And it's that ability to connect with humans. We use on campus the Nurtured Heart approach, which puts a spotlight on the greatness of the students and calls that out on a regular basis. I'm sure you can imagine Joel using it in a classroom. And instead of talking about what they're not doing right, we energize what they are doing right. And you get more of what you focus on. And so that's been incredible. We've also had an opportunity to train our parents in that approach. So we're really an active community that is moving forward along the path that I believe strongly is the way we need to go. And then we're looking at expanding into higher levels to extend this with a little project that we might be working on.
That we may or may not be cooking up behind the scenes. Something that I think I heard you say, Debbie, that I find fascinating, and I'm gonna volley this over to Tom Brennan. Tom, you're a picture, my friend. But so did you just suggest, Debbie, that you've had success measuring those soft interpersonal skills by seeing the impact they have on others? Did I understand that right? You and I speak a lot, and I'll make no bones about that, just as Jackie and I do. I had never heard that before, and that seems pretty revolutionary to me. I mean, that seemed like, Joel, Tom, am I sizing that up right? That's a very, very creative and I think potent way to measure the soft skills of one person, right?
Well, it's interesting because I've been thinking a lot about this conversation as I've gone through the walks of the neighborhood.
Yeah. And
one of the things I remembered is that when I was in elementary school, I went to public school, and there was a parochial school right around the corner. We both the public school and the parochial school migrated to the same junior high school. Mm-hmm. The first week of junior high, all the kids that went to the parochial school, when they were called on, they stood up. They exhibited manners and respect to the teacher. And the public school kids were sitting there like, what the heck are you doing? And there was an amazing dichotomy, a difference in what they were brought. Yeah. Now, to Debbie's point, you get into the workforce. And I spent 30 years in the hospitality industry. I spent the bulk of my 30 years teaching people soft skills. Right. And most of their reviews were based on soft skills. Mm-hmm. And these are skills that outside of the parochial school K through 5, no one taught. Yeah. And once you got to the public schools, the teachers would say, you don't need to stand up. Well,
Right.
frankly, we should go back to, no, stand up.
Yeah.
Show respect and actually teach that. So instead of going forward, to some degree, we need to go backwards. And
Interesting.
teach the please and thank you, yes and no's, and stand up. Show the teachers respect. They will show you respect, and the soft skills will just automatically start to evolve.
Interesting.
And without the soft skills, you're going to fail. And I think, Debbie, you're absolutely right. The earlier you can teach a soft skill, the longer you'll have to practice it. And by the time you're into the community as an adult or as a working contributor, you are now equipped to talk to, deal with, and understand people so much better than anything else you're going to get out of, say, a textbook. History is fun, science is fun, math is fun, but I'm not going to walk up to you and say, "Hey, Jackie, you look great. 1 + 1 is 2." It's just not going to. It's just not going to happen. We're going to actually have a shared dialogue about how are you, and pick a topic and carry a conversation. But it's all based on respect. And when we talk about soft skills, it's yes, how to connect, but it's how to interact, how to be polite. And honestly, right now, if you take a look at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all that, what we're going through with this COVID is a great opportunity to realize we don't know how to interact. We don't know how to have conversations with people who have a different opinion than ours. And I think we have a great opportunity going back to grade school, K through 5, and teaching kids how to have a conversation, how to politely and respectfully disagree. Now, as a former middle school debate coach, I taught my kids how to debate. And the easiest way to do that for practice, I would give them a topic I knew they were opposed to and say, you hate this. I know you hate this. Defend it.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden they had to do the research to argue against themselves and their inner thoughts. But as soon as you're capable of grasping more than just what you know, the easier it is to talk to others. But if you can't do it respectfully, it doesn't matter what you know.
So,
and I don't know if that even comes close to answering the question you asked.
No, I think it's good. First, I want to say that if you use the right tone of voice when you walk up to a woman and say 1 + 1 = 2, it can be very successful. It's all in the tone.
maybe not so much if I'm the other one. I don't know. But
well, now I think we should be fair here. If you could affect a Scottish accent and go to like a Sean Connery festival, I think you do very well for yourself.
Well, I will work on my brogue.
1 + 1 = 2.
That's pretty
So here, there's something important here that I want to suss out here. You said to go forward, maybe we need to go back.
Correct.
And I think there's some truth to that. But Jackie, should we just teach kids, manners for manners' sake? Or is there room to go deeper there if we're trying to educe out of them, if we're trying to draw out of them the sort of the nuanced, the nuanced world of soft skills?
I think personally that manners go a long way. I'll never say that we don't need as many as we get, because at the moment, there's a lot of political arguments that say no one should need to stand up when somebody else comes in the room, right? Or we don't need to do, but all of that just makes people communicate less and less and less.
Yeah.
Okay, let me make that clear. But moving back, like Tom said, in order to move forward is not such a bad thing.
Right.
Having manners and soft skills should not be considered a back step. Right, it should be considered a step that is necessary. Right. While I've been in the UK education system since 1940,
I think that the sound cut out there for a second. But go ahead, keep moving forward.
I could see the benefits of it, but purely like this, I needed to be working at a certain level. And I realized that if I passed these exams, it was going to take me there.
Yeah.
At no time did I have any confidence. Okay. At no time did I have much courage or any of the soft skills that were needed. What I did have was a brain which can pass exams.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's interesting. Let me just chime in here for a second. I was the exact opposite of that through all my whole school life. I did not have a brain that could pass exams. I did figure out soft skills both because they were sort of impressed upon me when I was young, and because I was small and I had to fight a lot, and I don't like fighting that much, you know. And so I had to learn how to read and suss out and talk, and you know, I had to navigate complex social situations. And so I guess where I'm going with that is, no, I'm drawing a blank. That's awkward when you're the moderator of the panel.
Can I jump in? I'd love to, because I love what Jackie was saying, and what Tom said as well. Because again, as a person coming from a history background, a lot of what I try to tell my students is I consider myself to be a sort of a classical liberal. Right. Not having anything to do with politics, but in terms of the style of education. Right. So we need to study a wide variety of subjects, and we need to study them from the standpoint of the reason we're doing this is to become a better human being. Right. Has nothing to do with a degree. It has nothing to do with, again, letters after your name. And I want to clarify something I said earlier. It probably sounded critical of other teachers. I believe that most of the problems in education don't stem from classroom teachers. I believe they have good hearts. I think a lot of it comes from the state and national level requirements, because the way it works here in the United States is you've got to have certain test scores or your school loses funding, and kids have to get certain graduation rates or your school loses funding. It's not the teacher's fault. They're doing what they have to in order for their school to survive. It's coming from higher up and being superimposed on them.
It's
right?
sort of
that's a huge issue.
Yeah, it's sort of the beatings will continue until morale improves approach.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And I think it's because in a lot of ways, that's what is easy to measure. Again, soft skills are harder to measure, right? You can teach them. And I love what Jackie was saying and what Tom said about teaching kids to debate or making sure that we are doing those things that way. That's what, again, in my classroom, it's a lot of Socratic style teaching. We ask a lot of questions. We have a lot of discussions where we teach students, here is how you disagree with each other. You don't disagree by calling each other names. Right. You don't disagree by pointing out that the other kid is short or fat or has big hair. All of those have applied to me. I didn't really appreciate those things, right? So that's why I cheered when you talked about being small. You guys can't tell. I'm sitting down. I'm only 5'3", so that really hit home with me, right? But yeah, education should be about teaching people to be better humans. That's what it should be about, and it starts with the way that you interact. One of the big things. So I teach at a parochial school. I've been there for 7 years. I love that place. It's wonderful. And one of the first things we teach kids, because the school's associated with a second chance home for kids who have been abused or abandoned or neglected or whatever. One of the first things they teach them is how to give a proper handshake, right? You shake someone's hand firmly, you look them in the eye, you say your name, right? And that may not seem like a big deal, but everybody knows the power of first impressions. Yeah. And when you teach that to a young kid who comes from a difficult background, now that child is learning how to interact with people in a different way. You're never going to measure that in a grade book. At least I haven't figured out how to. But that's such a key part.
That is so important. But definitely in the UK, and we have the same system as you need grades in order to survive.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
However, there's an argument that I have that says all that is taught in primary school with regards to soft skills needs to also feed right up to year 12 over there and year 13 over here, because you find definitely in the UK, as the kids get older, their communication skills start hitting the ground like they've never existed. You know, it's really, I'm amazed, you know, what's happening here. That it's a known fact here that primary schools actually, the results from the primary schools are so much better than the secondary schools. Yeah. Right. Somewhere along the line, somebody has to ask questions. What is being done differently in the primary schools?
Right.
You know.
So is Is it just a matter of, so first of all, I think we all agree that the public school system, whether it's here or in the UK, for better or for worse, by hook or by crook, it winds up being a self-serving system, right? Because it's an institution. When things become institutionalized, when they become bureaucratic, it's virtually impossible for them to achieve their original goal of serving their base. An institution or a bureaucracy can almost be defined as something that serves itself. Can we all agree on that? Or is there, okay, so if that's the case, then there's little to no sort of machinery built in for, we know that when kids hit 12, 13, 14, they're going to become very different for a few years, right? To say the least, right? You know,
Right.
They're going to hate you. They're going to be sick of you. They're going to be indifferent to you. They're going to be, you know, think they're all of these things. But we also know, because we can look back over civilization, most of them get over it, right? At a certain point, they start becoming, you know, humans again.
So Manny,
Yes.
I would like to hit that point, because I've had that conversation with many people. I've taught parenting for 30 years. They don't have to go through that. There is a way to remain civil and to have the ability to attain autonomy without severing relationships with your family members. And
This is what I wanted to explore. Yeah.
And
so
my husband and I were very successful with that with our daughters, but not because it happened by accident. When I decided to homeschool my daughters due to my youngest hearing impairment and some other things like the inefficiency of the public school, I had a very clear idea of what I wanted walking out my door at 18 on all levels. And we parented to that. You know, we kind of decided the big questions, and then all the little ones were really easy. Can I spend the night at Susie's house tonight? No, her parents drink too much. Or, you know, it was very simple. And it made the clarity allowed us to respond and not react to situations, and to encourage and not discourage, and to allow our daughters to negotiate. That was important to me, that they had that skill set. I didn't say no. Tell me why. Why is it important to you that you go to this recital? Tell me about it. Oh, that's a great idea. Let's go. So really giving them a voice and choice at a young age and nurturing that, because I, like I'm sure you do, believe that there's life lessons, period. The younger you learn them, the less they cost. I see your hand up there, Tom.
If I can chime in, Debbie, because I'm with you 100% on that. But what I also did with my kids, when I asked them to do something, or I had to punish them or something, they would say, why? And I would explain to them why. Yeah. And at one point, my now ex-wife would, why are you doing that? Because when I was a kid, it's because I said so. I'm the parent. But the kids are not learning anything. So if the kids can understand where you're coming from in your approach, you are opening up dialogue so that when they have a question and they can ask why, they're going to understand where I'm coming from. And then when they want to go to Susie's house to spend the night, they're already going to know the answer and will already know how to talk to me and how to ask.
Right.
So I think parents shying away from the why question, encourage it. Why do I have to take out the trash? Well, you know what? It's a 30-second conversation, but it's going to give them insight and knowledge. And it's going to show that, you know what, as an adult, I can be reasonable and have a conversation. And if you want to say, I don't need to take out the trash, and here's what I think. Now, ultimately, the kid's taking out the trash, but you're giving them the skills and you're teeing up the opportunities to learn and to ask.
Yeah, no, I agree. Guys, I want to take a beat here and move to if technology is going to be improving at a rate of getting twice as fast and powerful every 2 years, and we've already got phones in our pockets that are more powerful than the computers think about this, that sent a rocket to the moon. I just want to let that sit for a second, because I think that humans are amazing at adaptation to our environment. And I think that that's a good thing by and large. Otherwise, we'd completely lose our minds every morning, wouldn't we? You know, I woke up and the coffee was there waiting for me. We'd be freaking out, right? But there's a bad side to it too, which is it can create, we have insulated ourselves so much in this society. We're never going to come face to face with the saber-toothed tiger. We're never, you know what I mean? So all of these things that that used to keep us sharp and used to keep us focused, virtually gone. But my question is this: if we now have a phone that is more powerful than the computers that sent rockets to the moon, and we can do a 5-person panel discussion that goes globally for nothing, and our schools are still focusing on be at your desk at the bell, study to the test, one of the multitude of types of education of learning styles, and only one are paid attention to. All of these problems. What do we need to change to get ready for this world that we cannot predict?
Well, I was going to say, let me, I want to mention something Jackie mentioned earlier, which I'm 100% in agreement with. And that is that we have to grade something. We have to be able to measure something in the classroom. Like that, right? But I think a large part of it goes back to this idea that what is the overall purpose of education? Because like Debbie mentioned, and Tom as well, if you know what you want to see walk out of your house at age 18, then you start with that end in mind, and that's kind of what you train to. Well, the same idea with education. We need to change what we see coming out with a diploma, right? And so we need to change how we do grades, or we need to change how we do class. There's a million different things, but to me, it all goes back to this idea of the goal of education. I actually did a couple presentations about this at my school years ago. Is called what are you doing here? And the whole point is what we're doing here is to create better people. It goes back to teaching values, because technology changes, but good and evil have not changed. Like, I'm a huge fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, and in The Lord of the Rings, there's a great quote where one of the characters says, "Good and evil have not changed since yesteryear."
Right.
So what we need to be doing is teaching people how to be good people. We need to teach people how to think. We need to teach people how to reason. And if we're doing that, the way we do it can look different depending on culture and age and language and all that, sure. But the overall goal of education should still be the same as what it was 500 years ago, which is, again, and 500 years ago, education was a privilege. It wasn't a mandated thing where everybody had to get it. The people who got it because they needed it and wanted it, because the goal was to become better humans. That's what most universities were started for, was to train people to be better thinkers.
That's what a classic liberal education is.
That's it.
Yeah. Tom.
And I will tell you that I have a very unpopular opinion on the technology. I would remove all technology from preschool to kindergarten, or to the fifth grade.
And I would get an amen.
I would take, if it's a keyboard or a calculator, take it out of the classroom until you're getting into 6th, 7th grade. Teach the kids why 1 + 1 = 2. Give them math that's a lot of word questions. Let them learn to think, and do it in person, so they're interacting with one another and can have that exposure. But I think technology is making us stupid, because, Manny, to your point, we can't teach a kid technology that doesn't exist.
Right.
We can't do it. It's impossible.
Right.
But we can teach them manners. We can teach them thinking. We can instill confidence. We can do all of that, because that's never going to change. So why try to teach a computer language that doesn't exist? You can't. Right. So the keyboard hasn't changed since the first keyboard on a typewriter was created.
Right.
So, okay, they get to 6th grade, they take a class, learn keyboarding, you're fine. But teach the kids how to think, how to do logical processing. And I think computers, anybody can take a calculator, hit this button, this button, and this button, and get your answer. What did you actually learn? You learned nothing other than these 3 keys give you an answer. It doesn't help. I'm a big fan of the Dewey Decimal System. Go to the library, look it up in the index book, and go find the book. I don't care what Google or Wikipedia say. I don't. Look it up. Think about what you want to say and find it. Don't take somebody else's words and just regurgitate them. It doesn't do me any good.
Yeah. So I agree with you. No, it's not to say I agree with you. You're not alone in thinking in your views on technology at an early age. Waldorf is the same way. Waldorf, I would say, they go so far, it seems a little psychotic to me. Like, they don't even let kids play with things that are recognizable in shape and form. So that's Tom to the extreme.
So every kid's given a glass of water.
Yeah.
Pour it out, have fun.
They get to play with rocks and sticks.
But one of the challenges in Montgomery County, and I'm in Montgomery County, Maryland, which since I was a little kid and went through here as a student, and I went through as a parent, has been one of the top 5 educational counties in the world or in the United States, which makes me pity some of the other educational districts in the West Virginias and Kentuckys and Alabamas, because if this is good as a country can do, we are falling way short.
Yeah, well, and it's well known that we're falling way short.
And one of the challenges was when they were trying to do the online education, they had to find over 40,000 computers or devices for kids to have at home.
Mm-hmm.
You can't possibly keep up with that. So the thought is, no one K through 6 needs them, or K through 5. So I just saved you 15, 16,000. And now everybody's working on the same thing. And even during these conversations, I've raised my hand because I don't know how the whole thing works. And I see Debbie. Debbie keeps herself muted so she doesn't tell me to shut up, and I appreciate that. but there are rules of conduct that need to be taught. Yes. So there are ways to use this technology in a homeschooling or remote educational aspect. But I really think if we take the technology out of the younger grades and teach them how to think and how to solve problems and even how to ask how to solve a problem, we will be making much better students and much better people. So, and frankly, the grades in K through 6 mean nothing.
No, of course not.
So who cares? I wouldn't grade them at all.
Jackie, can we synthesize Tom's viewpoint with the fact that we're moving more and more into a technology-driven world?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I love you, Tom. However,
well, Debbie, Jackie, with that attitude, of course you can't.
I mentioned last week, bend the tree while it's young. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
The quicker you introduce, and I'm not saying 24 hours a day, but introduce how it would be helpful to young people, the sooner they adopt it as a habit. Yeah. That is my personal view.
Yeah.
Okay. And they will go through life knowing how this piece of technology can help them. For example, I have had my fill of year 9s and year 10s who I give an assignment to and say, right, you'll need to research that. And they'll sit in front of a computer and say, how do I do that?
But something to keep in mind with that, Jackie, when I was a kid, I was great at Pong, and that was that technology. I can't sit down and play Fortnite because I don't get it. So to Manny's point and the whole technology point, I can't teach a kid technology that doesn't exist.
Right. With my, I can take my son for an example here. He's year 4, grade 4 in the US. Now, because we introduced him to the wonders of research, i.e. Google, at an early stage, we can't speak now. Because if he says to us, if we're talking and he says, what does that mean? And we don't answer, he'll sit there quietly Googling the word and then nodding happily when he knows, okay? He's learned how the beauty of research for keeping in the know at a very early age. And no doubt it will keep him going because he's one of those kids, a bit like his mom.
So you see a sort of a mitigated access to technology at a younger age because, if I understand you correctly, because that's the direction everything is moving so quickly.
It's not even just because that's the direction. It's because it allows them, like some people say, oh, I live with you all day. I live with you. I work with you all day. I live with you all night. We sleep together. What on earth do we talk about?
Right.
Okay. If you give a young child, open up the world to them, they don't become addicted to one thing. They become addicted to the wonders of the world and how much there is to know. Mm-hmm. For example, in the inner city in London, you'd be amazed at how many children do not leave their exact neighborhood.
Right.
So you take them into London and they're amazed and they're looking around like, oh my goodness. Because they never see it. They never have reason to look out for it. Schools are not really equipped to nurture that side of them, you know, the curious side. And curiosity is such a big thing in bringing about the growth of those soft skills.
Yeah. So let me pose this question then to Debbie. Debbie, what's your point of view on what? And it's interesting. Mostly, by the way, guys, just as a general announcement, until this COVID-19 thing, and the way that different politicians reacted to it, I thought I was a card-carrying liberal. I am now not so sure. Okay, just putting that out there. But I say that because it seems to be mostly the left side of the aisle that bemoans this lack of intellectual curiosity in children. Now, it sounds to me like the kids in your school they're like, I got that all day long and spare change as well. What do you think is the main thing that drives intellectual curiosity, or to put it the other way, forestalls that sort of that incurious thing that we see so much?
So great question, Manny. When I had my after school program, I worked with kids in public school who by third grade, sadly enough, had lost their ability to have inquiry, to be curious, because it was so drudging going through. And just, as I mentioned on our last call, when you go this deep, it's not very enjoyable. It's not very engaging or inviting. But we allow our students to have voice and choice. We allow them to choose what they want to learn. Because similar to what Tom said, I want them to have manipulatives when they're learning math. I want them to understand so that they can think. I don't want them to just have the answer. We even make our kids, wait for it, still do long division. But I tell them, hey, get through it. Show me you know how to do it so you can go to the next step. And then that's why we have calculators. You know, I don't do long division anymore. But if you can't do it, you can't move forward because you don't have the understanding to think through the next problem. And I think being able to answer our students with very meaningful and purposeful answers as to why we do what we do engages them at a whole higher level. And they don't get that opportunity in the public schools here in Texas anyways, to ask the whys. We stand in what we do. So we're wide open. You can ask anything. We're very transparent with our students. And we listen to them when they tell us that they want to learn about something in particular. We're all in, and we make those resources available to them. To answer to what Jackie and Tom were arguing about, I was going to suggest what we do is lower elementary, first and second, uses hardly any technology. But upper elementary, we vacillate between the two. So they had a project to work on before Christmas where they were given access to certain websites that they could use. The next project they did after, when they returned back from Christmas, they only could use library books. They weren't allowed to use any technology because I wanted them to know what the glossary is, what the table of contents is, how you extract information. And that's a skill, right? It's not all just on. So I think there's a balance there. Yes.
Debbie, I've got a question for you, Jackie and Joel. You are in the classrooms far more than I am. So the question is, when you said you made technology available, do you actually teach the kids how to use the technology, how to get to the website, how to find what they're looking for, and how to kind of understand it? Or do you just say, here's a computer, have at it? What does that look like in the classroom? Because I honestly don't know. So I'm curious to that.
No, Tom, we don't. What we do is, if there is a lesson which has a requirement on the computer, then it has to be modeled first. Okay? Because the assumption is that they will have a level of knowledge of computers, but not necessarily as much as is needed.
But why? You know, well, how can you make that assumption? And that's a question. You put a kid in front of a computer who's never used one, who might be part of the 25% of the kids in Montgomery County who don't have computers and don't have internet at home. They're not going to know how to use one. So even if it's made available to them, if we don't teach them how to use the technology, is the technology actually a win? And
Well,
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
It's about mixing up skills, right? Trying to provide skills that will help you in your future life. So therefore, I love regaling them with stories of my final year in university with all the books piled up because there was no internet. And amazingly enough, I read.
Right.
And that was back in 19. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I teach them both ways. As Debbie said, they need to know what an index is, what a glossary. They need all of those things. I don't let anyone look up words on Google definitions.
No, but again,
dictionary.
The question is, and I think Joel's got an answer for this. Do you teach them how to use a computer? How to turn
Joel,
it on? Joel, how to use the computer? How to navigate from one screen to another, and actually use the technologies in front of them? Not how to look something up, but actually how to use the hardware and the software that's presented to them. Joel.
So it's interesting. I actually don't do any of that because I don't allow any technology in my classroom. I have a shoe rack that hangs on a door, and when kids walk in, they put their phones in there. And I am known in my school as the Luddite, where when you go in Coach Hallbaker's room, you don't need a computer. You don't need a phone. You know what you need? You need a book. And if you don't have a book, we're going to go get you books. Right. So, and Jackie, I'm with you. I actually was blessed. I got to spend one semester in the UK studying at Oxford as part of my undergraduate work. And I had books piled everywhere when I was over there studying. And that was what you did, is you read and you wrote. But like Debbie mentioned too, a lot of what I got to study was directed by what I wanted to study. I was there to study medieval civ, but I would sit down with my tutor, I'd sit down with my professor, and we would decide, okay, here's the topic I'm going to cover. And he would give me a list of like 40 books and he'd say, find, X amount of these and let's read them and write a report. And we'll talk about them next week. And so it was different. Because again, it was sort of pre-internet, right? Mm-hmm. But also, Jackie, I agree with you, and I'm actually a little bit surprised in Tom to may have found someone who even is less on board with technology than I am. I didn't know that person existed, so that's kind of cool. But Jackie,
go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I think I'm with Jackie in that even if kids don't have a device at home, I really believe at this point there's an overwhelming base knowledge of how to use the technology that whether it's from their friends' houses or from their buddies or whatever. And so for me, it's much more about teaching them not how to use it physically, but how to use it morally and ethically. For me, it's much more about asking the question, instead of asking the question, can we? The question is, should we? And if we do, what are going to be the consequences of it? That's what I focus on when it comes to technology. Because again, I don't do iPads in my classroom. In fact, what I do is I print out on paper article after article after article that shows the scientific evidence of how that's hurting education. And I hand it to my students and I say, here, read this. And I, honest to goodness, 2 years ago, I had a kid look at one. It was a 3-page article, 3 pages. I handed him an article. I said, here's why I don't use technology in my classroom. The kid looked at it. He handed it back to me and said, that's a lot of pages. I'm not going to read that. So you're the reason we have this problem. Thank you for that. That's wonderful.
So let me ask you guys as a group, and I think there is a tendency, a generational tendency, not just our generation. It looks like we're skirting 2 generations on this call. Joel, I suspect you're a little younger than the rest of us here.
What gave you that idea?
Yeah. but there's a very serious, we'll call it a human bias, for lack of a more accurate, precise term, that suggests that the way it was for me is good enough. Right? I mean, this is classic grumpy grandpa stuff. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, right. And get off my lawn, you kids. No, but think about it. It's like we have people coming from, post World War II, and in some cases the World War II generation, the greatest generation, and then we have the baby boomers, and then we have this and this and this, and what I think people fail to notice when they bemoan the perceived issues of the generation they're looking at, or generations they're looking at, what I think we collectively fail to notice is that every generation in human history was the worst generation of all time. And I say this a little bit cheeky, but it's serious too at the same time. All of human nature, all of human history has evolved on the blade of a knife. We have. There's no rational way to argue against that. And yet we're really kind of crushing it, right? So my question is this. Should we try to factor in and sort of correct for our own biases, or is it good enough to try to give our kids some simulacrum of what we grew up in, even though the world around them is virtually unrecognizable to our childhoods?
So I'm just going to mention this real quick. I teach history. It's what I love. It's what I've been studying. I think
Right.
that every generation has always thought the previous generation was terrible,
Yep.
or the generation after them is terrible, or
And
both.
vice,
I
yeah,
think
they
that's very true.
exactly. They think both generations are somehow wrong and they're right.
Yeah, and the thing is, there are also, and so it's very easy to just say, okay, well, so every generation thinks that, so everybody's wrong. But the thing is, what we have to be willing to do is evaluate the truth evidence of those claims. Are there certain things about my parents' generation that were terrible? Certainly. Are there things about my generation that were terrible in a different direction?
Absolutely
Yes.
not.
Well, yeah, my parents would disagree with you.
Right.
So what we need to do is we need to be willing to admit to and at least examine our own biases.
Yes.
We need to hold on what is worth holding on to, and we need to admit when we have fallen short. And
How do we
also
decide,
need
Joel, what's worth holding on to? How do we decide what's
it-
worth holding on to?
so in a completely biased way, this is where the study of history comes in. You look
Okay.
and you ask what has been universally respected, adored, appreciated, respected, taught, that kind of stuff, right? If
Okay.
so I teach my students, if a book has been read and studied around the world for hundreds of years, we should at least probably acknowledge it's worth looking into. One of the books we talk about a lot in my classroom is The Art of War by Sun Tzu, right?
Mhm.
Or we talk about books like Tale of Two Cities, right?
Sure.
These are books that have been read and studied in generations all over the world. So,
Right.
okay, we should probably pay attention to that.
Right.
Right. And same thing with music. We talk a lot about classical music. If these are songs that kids don't know that they know them, but they've heard them on commercials or they've heard them on the
Right.
radio or whatever
Yeah.
it may be, this is music that's been recognized around the world for 300 years. What was your favorite song 3 years ago? You don't even remember. This song's been around for 3 centuries. Let's pay
Mhm.
attention to it.
Yeah.
That's always going to be my go-to answer is let's look at what has worked.
Yeah.
Let's look at what hasn't worked and let's dump it. And keep trying to do that over and so it's a never-ending process of evaluation.
So we've got a never-ending process of evaluation to sort of let the past come to our aid in a sense, right?
Mhm.
We can assume at least that things that have stood the test of time that profoundly have intrinsic value.
There is
Now
something
let's-
good there or it wouldn't still be here.
Right. Now let's talk about the looking forward part, because this is the part I'm so concerned with. And this is the part where I feel like our generation our generations do have a unique challenge in that things are changing much more quickly than they ever have. Things have always been changing, but
Mhm.
again, because of Moore's law, we're like at the fast curve of the roller coaster now.
Yeah.
So, or maybe it's, I don't know. We'll see. But I would suggest that we can't afford to rest on our laurels and just say that what was good enough for me is good enough for them anymore.
I think it is very much mirrored in this COVID time right now.
Mhm.
This sort of an opportunity for redirection through reflection, where
Yeah.
where I'm sifting and I'm encouraging my students and my staff and anyone who will listen to me to look at habits, to look at thought processes, to look at what is working for you. What should you take forward? How should you use this time so you come out of it going, man, I like nailed it when I was in lockdown. I got all these projects done, all these things done. I switched some habits. And what do we want to leave locked down? what's not serving us,
Yeah.
and really to take the time to evaluate that. And I think it's kind of
Yeah.
the same as what you guys are talking about historically. And like Joel said, there's things in every generation that served us, and there's things that need to have, they experimented with it and it didn't really work out the way we hoped. And so we have the ability to look back and see. And I think for our students, we need to do the same. And for me, technology is a tool. That's all it is. And we need to make sure that they are adapt to use the tool when it's appropriate to use that tool. And to speak to that, when my daughters went off to college, they called me almost in tears mid-September because a lot of the students in their dorm that they were helping could not put on and figure out a Word document. They didn't know how to start an Excel sheet. They couldn't do a PowerPoint presentation. And my daughters have been doing that for years. They're like, what the heck? But they could play video games. But they couldn't use the computer for what the computer was designed for. In answer to your question, Tom, they could use it for random things, but not to serve them. It was a misuse of a really good technology.
Interesting.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I think that, Tom, does that get to the heart of your concern in a sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I felt that, Debbie. You nailed that.
So thank you, Debbie. That was a great answer.
So
Well,
we've got
I
to.
think too, Debbie. It's interesting because we've seen the same thing with our kids. They're not in college yet, but they're both teenagers. We've seen the same thing, not with technology, but with what we would consider life skills. Right? I've got a almost 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they go to school with a bunch of kids, or they play sports with a bunch of kids. They don't know how to run a washing machine. They don't know how to, use a vacuum cleaner. They don't know how to use a clothes iron. Like, they've never learned those things, and they're probably not going to pick them up in school because it's not like a lot of places are teaching home ec anymore, right? Because that got tossed out the window years ago, along with shop class and everything else. And so a part of the problem overall, I think, is that, and people that are watching may have to forgive me. I'm not trying to step on any toes, but a lot of parents are abdicating the parent side of kids' education. They're expecting the schools to do all of it, and what they're supposed to be learning at home isn't happening. It's supposed to be a partnership between the teachers in the classroom and the parents at home. And unfortunately, a lot of what we're seeing is the parents are expecting the teachers to raise the kids. In addition to teaching the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, I'm also supposed to teach your kids how to be good people. And I'm supposed to teach your kids how to take care of themselves when they're at home. And I'm supposed to teach your kids how to balance their checkbook and how to do their tax.
Yeah.
Jackie, that's just not possible. There's not enough time.
It's not at all possible, because at the end of the day, once you take the parents' input out of it, you find that kids start losing the ability to even have conversations. There's a lot of things that parents can nurture, which they, for one reason or another, seem to want to pass to the teacher, and the teacher doesn't have the resources necessarily. Technology will never take the place of that. Technology has its place. Okay. Yeah. It's not necessarily the same place for everyone at every age. And that is a big thing with education these days. It's got to actually taking into account what you said, Manny, about it worked for me. So why doesn't it work for them?
Yeah.
Well, I could be more standardized because my personality wouldn't allow them to win on that standardization anyway, because I do what I want. Okay. However, kids nowadays, they're in a different world. Okay. Standardization will never work for them. So therefore, we have to look at what we have available and adapt the whole system to give them the best education that they can get.
Yeah. This opens up a much bigger, much more profound question. Is it incumbent upon us, and by us I mean Debbie, Jackie, and Manny, who are building an attempt at an answer to this huge problem, but I also, when I say us, I mean the collective, to do what we can do to produce higher caliber citizenry, higher caliber humans, regardless or in spite of, or whether or not the parents will do their role. Mm-hmm. This is a big, big question, because let's face it. Let me just finish the thought, Tom, and then you're first. What we need is what I would call, we need a larger number of what I would call high value humans. Humans, or another way you might think of them is Renaissance people, people who are versed in a multitude of things, people who have soft skills, people who can lead, people who can follow right. We need artists, we need business owners, we need entrepreneurs, we need heads of industry, and we need them to have a profound shift in consciousness almost. So, Tom, what do you think? What do we do here?
You're dead right. I think there are a couple things. One, I think we have to reevaluate who the teachers are in the classroom. By that, I mean, some of the standards are so amazingly high. You get a young person, 23, 24 out of college, they get a degree, they've got a lot of debt, they become a teacher. Now they have to get their master's. To stay in the educational system, they have to get a master's. Yeah. And my question would be why? Right. And you may have someone like myself who retired at the age of whatever it was. Put me in a classroom.
None of our business.
I'm old, just old. But put me in a classroom and I can teach. Yeah. Parents have been trusting me with their kids since preschool coaching and debate and extracurriculars. Why not in a classroom? Oh, I don't have a master's. I can't even substitute. Right. We are missing out on a tremendous amount of resources because we're saying, gee, you don't have, I go out and get a master's in ballet. I can't teach history, but I got a master's. So according to the system, I can teach history.
Right. And Jim,
doesn't make any sense. And also you mentioned the parents. If we really want to, and I thought about this last week when I was listening to Volume 1, you're talking about pivoting into change. If we really want to change, we need to start educating parents.
Yeah.
Have Saturday school and say, parents, this is what we're teaching this month from say the humanities, and teach the parents how to stand up and shake hands and the please and the thank yous and teach them. No, I'm dead serious.
No, you're right.
Because if we don't teach the parents, the children cannot have anything reinforced at home.
Look, I'm laughing because of how right you are.
And, my brother wrote a book on the Common Core and he gave it and I read it and I said, oh, thank God my kids are so far beyond that because I didn't get it.
Yeah.
So I couldn't, if my kids were going through that, I could not have helped them. It just escaped me. Mm-hmm. So if you want the parents to be a partnership, they have to be taught. And it's an ongoing process. And there are thousands of reasons why that can't happen easily, but it can happen. It absolutely can happen. And it needs to happen if we're serious about changing the educational model. Because then the kids that we're teaching now, they won't have to go to Saturday school because they learned it when they were students. And those are the core elements that will carry through year after year. We may change the technology, we may change the books we're reading, but the manners, the humanity, the confidence in the communication, that's never going to change.
Right.
So we got to work on the parents. And frankly, we also need to have a hard conversation with the parents and tell them, participate or shut up.
Yeah.
Because going into a school and yelling at a teacher because your kid got a D, well, you know what? Forget about the D, but let's talk about the kid. What did the student do or didn't do? And it's not the teacher's fault. And I'll give you one quick story. My oldest son brought home a English paper. He got an A. I read it. I called the school and said, I want a meeting with the English department head and the teacher. So I went and had the meeting and they asked, why are you here? It's like, you gave this an A. Yes, you should be happy. It's like, why? My kid clearly learned nothing.
This is not A work. They should
and
not have gotten an A.
And they said, Mr. Brennan, you're the only parent that calls us when their kid gets an A. So, because I don't care about the grade, I care about the knowledge.
Yeah.
There's nothing here grammatically correct. Spelling errors all over. Thoughts are a mess. This is not an A. And the teacher said, well, he worked hard and he understood what we were trying to get to. It's like, really? He didn't demonstrate any of that. Right. So I was the parent saying, please teach my child, and I don't care about the grade. And what we need to get more parents to get on board with don't worry about the grade, look at what they're doing and how they're doing it. Because that's far more important, especially at the K through 6 or the K through 5. Yeah. So it's educate the parents and also get them on board with the shutting up.
Yeah. Because you know what? Can we quote you on that? Get them on board with the shutting up.
Yes, absolutely.
that sounds to me like something that Don Rickles might have said, and I appreciate you for that.
But I'm serious. It's the parents. Yeah. Not every student is going to be a straight A student, and that's okay.
And that's okay. That's right.
But every student can learn.
Yeah.
And if a parent is complaining about not getting an A, they're missing the whole point of education.
That's so important. That's such a big deal. final thought for the group. Elon Musk said when asked why he started Tesla and SpaceX at the same time, he said, if something, and I'm paraphrasing him here, he said, if something is really, really worth doing, even if there's a very small chance of success, you should do it anyway if you can. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the level of and scope of what we're talking about here. Do you guys agree with that? What are your thoughts? Just Debbie, you've been so polite.
Well, I think that the school that I've set up mirrors and brings into real life a lot of what you're saying. So we don't give grades. I tell my parents, when your child starts with us, we have 5 years to get them ready for the next level of their education. We're 1st through 5th. So some children adapt and move very quickly. So let's move them quickly, not socially, but academically. Whereas others take a little bit longer. When they have a growth spurt, they don't learn the same way. There's so many factors. Right. Parents get divorced. So having that flexibility is really important, but really being clear on what the next stage looks like. Yeah. And with my background, I've been fortunate enough that I know what those all look like so we can prepare adequately. And I think that's really important. And I think it is important enough for me that when I'm looking at bringing a student on board, and I'm sure Joel can attest to this, because I'm a private school, I have a lot of flexibility and a lot of ability to choose who gets to be a part of my community. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the parenting, at least the willingness to learn parenting skills, to teach your child that it's a cooperative household, that, no, I'm not paying you to take out the trash. You made some of the trash. It's a cooperative. We all work together. That there's a lot that can be said for that. And I have a lot of faith in the future. Yeah. I've been able to test a lot of theories, and we know exactly what to do. It's time to do it. So
next question, Joel, what are the 3 things? No, better yet, do you think that we can see and make and affect the kind of changes we're talking about here within the framework of the existing public school system?
Within the existing framework?
You heard
absolutely not. Absolutely not, because there's too much directive from the top down where people, I mean, if my career depends on making sure that my school keeps its funding, then I'm going to focus on what keeps the funding, and that's the grades.
Right.
If you come in and say to me, well, we don't need to worry about grades, then I'm not going to listen to you. Now, I actually agree with the idea, what Jackie said, we need grades, but I also love what Debbie's doing in terms of, but not at this age. Like at this age, that's not what the focus should be. And I agree with that all the way through high school. Like Tom said, I've taught my kids that we've told them for years. If you come home with a C and that's the absolute best you can do, great, well done. Right? Because it's not about the number on your report card. But the way the system is set up now is it is so geared toward GPA and graduation rates. Now, and again, there is a place for those things.
Sure.
Because I also get really irritated with the high schools who are like, we're just not going to give academic awards anymore. Well, then why don't you just tell the kids not to try? Because that's what you just did. Right? But that shouldn't be the only focus of the education. The grades matter. But they're not the end all be all. And the problem is the way the structure is right now. That's it. That's the only thing that people really focus on. Parents, administrators, and again, I'm thankful to work at a place that's not the case. We care about our grades, but we care a lot more about our character development.
Okay, good. Jackie,
so
what are the 3 top things that you see as needing to be built into the educational experience moving forward?
I think there has to be a point of actually accurately mapping up the changes that are happening in the world with the system as it works. So it's not so much a piece of machinery that churns out these people in a standardized model of various abilities. Right. Secondly, I think there needs to be more of a focus on like critical thinking, like courage, like confidence, like, all of those soft skills. They need to be ingrained, embedded in the system in order to build the foundation in a way that it cannot be toppled. There should not be such a change between primary and secondary education. It should be a firm foundation which allows that child to grow into themselves. And lastly, it's get with the priorities. You know, yes, you need a system that keeps your economy growing. Absolutely. But you also need different types of people within that economy to make it, give it the growth that it needs, give it the energy that it needs. The standardized system does not work. And as Joel would say,
and Tom, I saved you for last. I just want to get your final thoughts on this discussion and on the direction we're going.
Well, I was thinking about that. And I will say that the thing that leads me to have a lot of hope for the future is Debbie, Joel, and Jackie. Because the reality, we've got 3 people out of millions that are putting forth an effort to look at where we are and trying to determine where we can go and how to get there in the most economic and successful manner. And you 3 are just a representation of the number of great people out there that see the value in education.
Yeah.
So that, to me, as long as we have people involved, like the 5 of us sitting here, we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
The challenge that we will have is to get, we'll say our caliber of people in the right positions in the administration, so that we can actually tear down 12 levels of a 17-level hierarchy, so that the money can actually be funneled in place where it's needed. And so that standards that can be put together intelligently that include the humanity and the compassion that we've been talking about. So it's taking what we've talked about from a 5-person conversation, sharing it with the 5,000 followers that we each have, and having them share it with their followers, and have people buy into it and say, you know what, change can be had, and it's not going to be that difficult if we all just decide to do it.
Right.
So hope is I think our greatest opportunity, and you all do an outstanding job of representing hope.
I want to thank each of you guys for taking the time today. Debbie, of course, it's always a pleasure. Tom, it was absolutely fantastic to have your voice and dare I say your beard joining us today. Joel, I'm tremendously pleased with what you brought from the perspective of someone who's been working in a private school as an educator. And Jackie, as always, I mean, your views and your energy are a ray of sunshine to me, and I think probably to the rest of the world. Each of you, please share this on your own timelines and get it out to your friends. And if any of you watching, if this has been relevant for you, please share this. This is going to be an ongoing discussion series. If you know someone or you yourself would like to join us, reach out to me and talk to me about it. I'll set you up with my assistant. And if you're not a complete whack job, we'll get you on the program. And if I'm feeling frisky and you are a complete whack job, I still might bring you on the program and pimp slap you up and down the street, because I don't have to adhere to the rules. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. You guys in viewership land, thank you. Share this, talk about it. This is, I would go as far as to say, and without even being hyperbolic, the future of education is the future of society. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe there's a way that we can, that's so obvious and so big in front of us that we can kind of miss it sometimes, but I think it's absolutely true. We can't expect any better from our society than what we do with our children. Mm-hmm. It's just no way. Right. It don't add up, as the man once said. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.